negative. It was, I know, I just. Yeah, it was just.
Okay. So I'll answer any questions you have on any test questions. Yeah. Number 3. All right, so this one says, if dy dx equals 4y squared over x, and y equals -1, and x equals 1, and what is y when x equals e? So separation of variables, this can be separated to be dy over 4y squared, or actually let's just have it be y squared equals 4 over x. Doesn't matter, you could leave the 4 on the right or you can move the 4 to the left. Integrate both sides. This is y to the -2, so its integral would be y to the -1 over -1. And on the right, this would be ln 4 ln x plus c. So then you use this initial value information to find the value of c. Actually, this time I'll solve for y first. So I get 1 over y equals -4 ln x plus c. So then y would be 1 over -4 ln x plus c. So now let's find the value of c. If you substitute in y equals -1 and x equals 1, you get 1 equals, or -1 equals 1 over -4 ln 1 plus c. Ln 1 is 0. You get -1 equals 1 over c, rather. So c is -1. So now you have y equals 1 over -4 ln x minus 1. Now just substitute e in to find the value of y. So y at e would be 1 over -4 minus 1. -1/5 is the answer. Okay? What else? Yeah.
For the previous ones,
Yeah.
just for the grading,
Yeah.
I didn't do like the curve right at all,
Okay.
but I got 2 points.
Yeah. Okay. So the way that the rubric worked for number 10 was part A, you get 1 point for having all the correct 0 slopes, 1 point for having all the correct non-zero slopes. So if any one of those was wrong, you wouldn't get that point. 1 point for the solution. In part B, that was just worth 1 point. So if any part of your explanation was wrong or whatever, that was worth 1 point. Part C was worth 5 points. 1 point for correctly separating variables, 1 point for doing both antiderivatives correctly, 1 point for having a plus C. Just writing plus C, you get 1 point. 1 point for using the initial condition to solve for C, and 1 point for solving for Y. So these separable differential equations, when there are free response questions, are always worth 4 or 5 points. Just make sure that you maximize your point total on those types of questions, because you get points for like little stuff, okay? Even if you make a mistake, like say you make a mistake solving for C or whatever, like you can still get 4 out of 5 points. Or if you solve for Y incorrectly, you can still get 4 out of 5 points. The only exception to that, like as long as you're consistent and you follow your mistake through in a correct mathematical way, you get those points. The only exception is if your mistake somehow made the problem easier, then you don't get the points that come after it. Okay, so like in this question, a really key part of the question was understanding that when you solve for Y, it ends up being the negative of the radical. If you solve for Y in a way that you don't even have a radical, then you don't get the point for solving for Y because you made the question easier than it was before. Does everyone understand what I'm saying?
Why is it negative?
Because if you look at the initial condition, f of 0 is -2. The only way you could end up with a negative Y value is if y is a negative radical.
You're not even allowed to put the plus sign there, though?
You can put the plus sign there, but when you solve for y, you have to eliminate the plus sign. Like you have to know that the final answer isn't plus or minus. The final answer is minus. Because it's a function. Particular solutions to differential equations are always functions. If what you have in your final answer is not a function, like plus or minus radical, then it's not you're not going to get full credit for it. Okay? Particular solutions to differential equations are always functions. Always functions. Okay? Yeah.
Can we go over part B?
Part B?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Okay. Yeah, sure. So the differential equation that they give you in part A is dy dx equals x plus 1 over y. And the question says, while the slope field is drawn at only 12 points, it's defined at every point except y equals 0. Describe all points in the xy plane, y not equals 0, for which dy dx equals negative 1. So if you set this equal to negative 1 and you solve this equation, you get negative y equals x plus 1, or y equals negative x minus 1. So the answer to this question is they want a description of points in the plane. So you would say all the points that are on this line except points along the x-axis, or you could actually just say the single point that applies to, except when y equals 0, are going to yield a negative 1 derivative. So a full credit answer would be all points on the line y equals negative x minus 1, except, and you can either say when y equals 0, or you can say when x equals negative 1, or you can say except the point negative 1, 0, or whatever. Any combination of those, any one of those three things would be acceptable here. But this is a description of points in the plane. You have to have words. If you don't have words and you just have this, you won't get that point. Okay? It says describe. Describe does not write an equation.
Isn't it? It already says where y doesn't equal 0, so you actually have to write that down. Because I didn't write it down and you didn't credit still.
I think I had that same kind of question. I don't know if I'd risk it. I gave it to you because of that, what you just said, but I wouldn't be surprised if they wouldn't give it to you. So just be careful. If you're in the test and you're thinking, should I write this down? Write this down. Okay, that way you're just eliminating the doubt. Okay. All right, what else? Yeah. 4. So this one says, an ice cube tray is filled with water at 75 degrees Fahrenheit, put to a freezer at time t equals 0 minutes. The water cools at the rate of 18 e to the blah, blah, blah degrees Fahrenheit per minute. So what they're saying is dt, the rate at which the temperature is changing, is 18 e to the negative 0.45 t. That's the information they're giving us in symbols. It says to the nearest degree, what's the temperature of water at 30 minutes? So this is actually not a differential equation problem, so to speak. It's more like an FTC part 1 type question. If you're trying to find the temperature at 30, you just need to take the temperature at 0 plus the integral from 0 to 30 of t prime of t dt. Right? This is FTC part 1. So this is just the initial temperature, which is 75 degrees, plus the integral from 0 to 30 of 18 e to the negative 0.45 t dt. And I wouldn't bother doing this by hand. You have a calculator. Definitely do this with a calculator. You'll save yourself some time. So I'm just going to do 75 plus math 9 the integral from 0 to 30, and the function is 18e to the negative 0.45t x, and then dx. Enter, there's the answer, 115.
Yes.
Oh, that's not right.
And subtraction.
Um,
Oh my God, this is just like.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yes. Wait, I'm a little confused.
Does it pull out the rate of?
Oh, this is something minus.
Yeah, I agree. It's minus. It should be minus. So if I just press entry and then just change that to a minus, everything's editable, but still not editable. 35. Right. What else? Yes, number 1. So they're giving you a differential equation, dv dt equals k radical b. And by the way, I definitely could have not given you the stuff that's in parentheses here, because it's fully described in the previous sentence. I was just thinking it would be a little too hard for people to come up with it, but hopefully you're like, that wouldn't have been hard at all. I'm hoping, because it's possible that they wouldn't give you this directly. Okay? So this is separable. It's a dv over radical b equals k dt. So this is b to the negative 1/2. Its integral would be b to the positive 1/2 times 2 equals kt plus c. So then they give you an initial condition. They say at time 0, the volume is 9. So we can substitute that in to figure out what c is actually. So if this is 2 times radical 9 equals 0 plus c, so c must be 6 then. So now I have 2v to the 1/2 equals kt plus 6, right? And then it says at t equals 2, the volume of the tire is 25. So that gives us enough information to now figure out what k is, which is what they're asking you. So you just do 2 radical 25 equals 2k plus 6. So this is 10 equals 2k plus 6. 2k equals 4, k is 2. And that's what they're looking for, the value of k. So notice I didn't waste time solving for b. They don't ask you to solve for b. If you can do the what's required of you without doing all the steps, that's a time saver, and whatever, an hour for 30 questions is not a lot of time, multiple choice. So you want to save that time and use it for other problems that you need it for. What else? Yeah. Okay. 6. So we have this differential equation dy dx equals 1/2 y cosine x. And they say f of x is a solution to this differential equation and f of 0 equals 2. And they want to know which of the following statements about f of x are true. First of all, f of x has a vertical tangent when y equals 0. So how do you answer that question? How do you know if that's true or false? Yeah, you just want to not have
when y.
not f of x, so dy dx, right? So you want to know if what number 1 is saying is if you substitute y equals 0 into dy dx, you get something that's undefined, and that's not true. If I substitute y equals 0 in here, I definitely don't get something that's undefined. I get 0, right? I get 0 times something that's not undefined. So the bottom line is this is 0 when y is 0. So number 1 is not true, okay? For choice 2, it says f of x has a horizontal tangent when x equals pi over 2. That's saying if you substitute pi over 2 into dy dx, you get 0. And that one is true. If I substitute pi over 2 in here, right, I get cosine pi over 2, which is 0. It doesn't matter what this is, it's not undefined, so I get 0 for sure if I substitute pi over 2 in for x. So that one's true. The third choice is the slope of f of x at the point 0, 2 is 1. That's just saying if I substitute in x equals 0 and y equals 2, I get 1. Well, let's try it. If I do 1/2 of 2 times cosine 0, that's definitely 1, right? Because the cosine of 0 is 1. This is just 1. So that one's true. So the answer must be B. 2 and 3 are true. Everybody understand that? Be really careful about questions like this, because sometimes they'll just throw a monkey wrench in the operation and they'll say, which of the following statements are false? So you gotta make sure you read the question carefully so that you know if they're asking you which ones are true or which ones are false. Or they might say, not necessarily true or not necessarily false. So you have to make sure you read the question and understand exactly what you're looking for. Are you looking for ones that are true or are you looking for ones that aren't true? Okay? What else? Okay. So we have y dx equals x squared y, and it says y could be which of the following? Well, if you just solve this, it's separable. This is dy over y equals x squared dx. And integrate, you get ln y equals x cubed over 3 plus c, right? So if you solve this for y, you get absolute value of y equals e to the x cubed over 3 plus c, which is really c times e to the x cubed over 3. This c is not the same as that c, of course. And so y would have to be plus or minus c e to the x cubed over 3. So the only thing that y could be is something that fits this form. And so the only thing that fits this form is b. It has to be b. It can't be a because there's no plus 7 here or plus a constant. It can't be c because the exponent's wrong, and it can't be d because there's no e at all. Does that make sense? Yes?
Couldn't it be like e to the x cubed over 3 plus e to the c, and then?
No. It would be, this simplifies to be e to the x cubed over 3 times e to the c.
Yeah,
Right? He's like, I sympathize with you. She's like, I don't. Just kidding. I can see that, like, that's probably the person, I didn't write this question, but the person who wrote this question was probably like, oh, this will get him. You know? So it's like there's always going to be like the most common wrong answer, like the distractor answer that people select on. Any other questions at all? Just one more thing. I don't think anybody got the solution curve correct in the slope field. So there, it's not like it doesn't have to be perfect. It really doesn't. But in this case, it kind of did. Okay. If you look at part B, like what you got in part B, you said that that those are points where the derivative is -1. So if you are trying to draw the curve that goes through the point 0, -1, then you definitely should have made it look linear. That's the first question. I mean, that's the first thing that I'm looking for is, does your solution curve look linear? If it doesn't look linear, I just moved on to part C because you didn't get, I just moved on to part B because you didn't get that point. Another thing I'm looking for is it has to not include the endpoints because it says right here, x is between -1 and 1, not including the endpoints. So if you draw a solution curve that does include the endpoints, once again, I just moved on, didn't give you that point. So not a single person got that point. You got to think about why you didn't get that point and pay attention to that stuff the next time they ask you to draw a solution curve on a
So
slope.
what exactly would it look like?
It just looks like, something like this. That's what it needs to look like. Linear without including endpoints. So this is the point -1, 0, and this is the point 1, -2. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is a dumb question.
There's no such thing. Go ahead. I mean, there is, but you probably won't ask one.
So the other day, when we were looking at those free response questions, one of the, we like had to draw the slope of the question too, I think it was like part two or something.
Okay.
And it was like, it's this line and then all the solutions below it, or like
Right.
above it or something like that.
Correct.
Why is that like that? And I'm just-
Because that question was asking you, when is the second derivative positive or something like that?
Oh, okay.
So we set the second derivative,
I just
which
didn't remember
was-
what that
which was something like this, it was like, but it was d squared y over dy squared over dx squared. And we set this like greater than 0 or something like that. So we ended up with a linear inequality. The solutions of a linear inequality are like a whole region of the plane. The solutions of a linear equation are a line, not above or below or anything like that. Okay? Anything else? Now, if this question had asked, describe all points in the plane for which y is increasing, then you'd set the first derivative greater than 0, and you'd end up with a linear inequality. Actually, it wouldn't be linear in this case. Well, yeah, it would be linear. So you'd end up with a linear inequality, and the solution would be, the answer would be the same sort of thing. It'd be like everything above this line, whatever. Any other questions? Overall, I thought it was a really good test. There were 8 5s. It's really good. 8 5s, 2 4s, and 1 3. So keep it up. You guys are really doing great. You're going to really be happy with yourself after May 4th. May 4th, we're done. Completely done. So it's coming right
Almost
up.
every day.
So we have a few minutes. I think we should play free response roulette. You thought I was going to say it again.
Let's
work this Wednesday.
That's not a thing.
Yeah.
And then I can do the, when you.
So let's see.
Well, this one's
They just can't show us new material, but they can do a review. Yeah, technically all are.
Actually, like I could do new material if I wanted to. Come on.
No, you can't.
I don't know where it is.
Oh, darn, that's so unfortunate.
Let's just pick a number then.
4.
So give me a year that's past 2000, because before that they were a little weird.
4. You know, 4.
2009, and give me a number between 1 and 6. 6? No, you.
Yeah, it said
6. Okay, 2009
Yeah.
or 6. 2009. A or B? B? That year there happened to be 2 AP exams, Form A and Form B. So look at Form B. They used to do a Form B in case people like had a family emergency on the day of the AP test. And they also gave the Form B test to like international students where it was like much later than the other administrations or whatever.
So do they not do that anymore?
They don't do that anymore.
So what happens if you have like an emergency on the day?
They might do that, but no, emergency, forget it, you missed out. But for international students, there might be a different version, but they just don't publicize it anymore. Maybe because they reuse it, I don't know. All right, so number 6. Oh, this is the scoring guidelines.
Take away one more.
So I'm gonna make it so we can't see the scoring guidelines. All right, this is number 6. All right, so they give you a table that's a derivative. That's the first thing I notice when I see this problem is this is a derivative, v prime, or v, right? It's a rate of change. Okay, so it says the velocity of the particle is modeled by a differential function that's in this curve, or in this table, okay? And then they give you an initial position. At 0, the position is is 7. So I'm going to write that down. I'm going to say x of 0 equals 7. Okay? Estimate the acceleration of the particle at 36. How do you do that using a table? If this is the velocity. First of all, how is velocity and acceleration related? Acceleration is the derivative of velocity. So generally, how do you estimate a derivative using a table? Yeah, you pick points on either side. So in this case, I'm going to pick these 2 points and do the average rate of change, right? So I'm going to say, for part A, I'm going to say the acceleration at 36 is approximately v of 40 minus v of 32 over 40 minus 32, right? So this is equal to 7 plus 4 over 8. And then I'm going to move on to the next problem. I'm not going to do any other work. Because if I add 4 and 7 wrong, and I get the wrong answer, then I don't get that point, right? Plus, I'm saving time. It's a win-win. Just move on. You'll get full credit for that. It does say indicate units of measure, though. What are the units here? Meters per second, or meters per second squared. That's a full credit response for A. Part B, using correct units. Explain the meaning of the integral from 20 to 40 of v of t in the context of this problem. Okay, who can say that a little more succinctly? Sort of. Change of what? Position. So what's the word that we have that means change of position? No, it starts with a D. It ends with displacement. Displacement. So this is the displacement of the particle from 20 to 40. That would be the best way to write it. Now, if you wrote, it's the total accumulation of change of distance between t equals 20 and t equals 40, you probably get credit for that, but you're wasting time, right? So it's displacement. All right, so that's the words, okay? It's the displacement in meters between t equals 20 seconds and t equals 40 seconds. Okay, I would use units. They might not give you full credit if you don't use the units in describing that. Then it says use a trapezoidal sum of the 3 subintervals indicated by the data to approximate this integral. Okay, so the integral from 20 to 40 of v of t dt is approximately equal to, this is the way I was written, it's going to be L ram plus R ram divided by 2. Now, if you want to actually use the trapezoid formula, 1/2 height times b1 plus b2, great. That works perfectly. You get full credit for that. That messes me up for some reason. This is the way I was taught, so this is the way I do it. If you want to do it the other way, it's perfectly fine. So this ends up being, so we're going from 20 to 30. So the left rectangle approximation method would be the width of the rectangle times the height of the rectangle given by the left endpoint, plus the width of the rectangle times the height of the rectangle, plus the width of the rectangle, 8, times the height of the rectangle, -4, plus, same thing, 5 times -8. Now I'm doing right-hand endpoints, plus 7 times -4, plus 8 times 7 divided by 2. Done. What are the units? Meters. Don't do this arithmetic, because if you make a little tiny mistake, you don't get that point, right? Just leave it. Part C, for t between 0 and 40, must the particle change direction in any of the subintervals indicated by the data in the table? Yes or no? Why?
Because velocity is positive and then.
Sure. Velocity goes positive and negative. Is that a good enough explanation? What are they looking for in this problem for you to say? They're looking for a very specific thing. And if you don't say it or actually say what it says, then you don't get that point. IVT, right? This is a continuous function. How do we know it's continuous? It says it's differentiable. It's a continuous function that goes from positive to negative. There's no way it can go from positive to negative without hitting 0 somewhere in between. So you have to say, since v of t is continuous, by the intermediate value theorem, or IVT, since v of 8 is positive and v of 20 is negative, there has to be some point in between 8 and 20 where v of t is 0. That's what the explanation would have to say.
You have to also include that it goes back on.
It only says, must the particle change direction in any of the, identify the subintervals. Yes, okay, so you have to say that between 8 and 20. You have to say the same thing between 32 and 40 for the same reason. They're okay with that? They're looking for IVT. If you don't use IVT, or you don't actually define what IVT is without saying the word for some reason, then you won't get that point. Okay? I mean, if you said it's a continuous function that's positive and then it's negative, therefore it has to have a 0 in between. You'll probably get credit for that, but you're wasting your time again. D, suppose that the acceleration is positive from 0 to 8. Explain why the position of the particle at 8 seconds must be greater than at 30 seconds. Or, greater than 30 meters. What do you think? Question. Any ideas? What does this have anything to do with it? Acceleration of the particle? What does that tell you about the table?
Something that's concave up.
They're telling you that not v is concave up. They're telling you x is concave up. They're telling you v is increasing though. That's the important thing. V is increasing. It's never going to be smaller than 3. It's 3, and then it goes up and up and up till 5.
Yeah,
That's
so
what.
then, even if it's 3 inside or something, 8 times 3 is 24, plus 7 plus 2 over 3. I
Yeah,
don't know how you'd explain.
that's exactly it. So you'd say since, here's what I would write. I would say since A of t is when it's positive, A of t is positive, B of t is increasing on the interval from 0 to 8. So the integral from 0 to 8 of b of t dt has to be greater than or equal to the integral from 0 to 8 of 3 dt, which is 24. So x of 8 has to be greater than or equal to x of 0 plus the integral from 0 to 8 of 3 dt, which is 21, or 31. Is that right? 4 plus,
Yeah.
no, 7 plus 24 is 31. Done. Does that make sense? That's like a really succinct way of writing it, and you get full credit. Try and avoid like paragraphs if you can, because it's like very time consuming. You know what I mean? Use symbols. When you're writing things out like this, don't forget the DTs, because you might get some grumpy dick who's just like, you didn't write the DT, so I'm not giving you credit for this. All right, so don't do that. Don't give them that opportunity. I know that a lot of you are guilty of that. That's why I'm saying. You forget DT when you write an integral. it's technically not right. It's unlikely they would take points off for something like that if it's not really central to what you're arguing, but still, it's not mathematically correct what you're writing, so they could take, not give you credit for it. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can we look at the function?
Yeah, question. Okay, so on part one, what was part one again? It was, okay. Yeah, so that was just 1 point. That was super easy, so that makes sense, right? Notice you had to have units in part A and B, and they give you 1 point for having the correct units in both parts. So if you forgot the units in part B, when you're explaining in the context of the problem, if you forgot the units, you wouldn't get credit for that units that you did correctly in part one. Okay, so just be careful about that. The trapezoidal sum was worth 2 points. So I can imagine if you made a little error in your simplification, they'd give you 1 out of those 2 points. But you know what I mean? It's like a waste, total waste. Part C, that was the question where you had to identify subintervals, the IDT type thing. They don't actually say that here. I think they're probably looking for it though. If you don't state that the function is continuous and you don't state the IDT, I don't think they would have given you full credit for this, to be honest with you. Okay, so you got to be careful about that. Here after I made a big deal out of it, I think it's right. I really do. If you can't just say, if they say explain why it's true, and you're like, obviously it's true. Like that's not a good enough explanation, right? You have to like give some evidence, like some proof. And then the last part, they pretty much have exactly what I have. Okay, and it's worth 2 points. Any questions on that? You can play this game at home anytime you want. All right, so we got 1 more unit to go, and then we'll be totally done. The only things we haven't done, like if you're ever playing free response roulette at home, any question that involves the word area or volume, we probably can't quite do yet. You might be able to figure it out, but we haven't talked about it very rigorously yet. We talked about area a little bit, but any area question that's likely to be on the AP test, we're not quite able to handle yet. And then some questions that have the word average in it, we can't solve either, because we're going to get to that. So I would say there's maybe a week and a half worth of new material. We'll take a test, and then we'll just be able to review it. Everyone's going to be really great.
Every day is wellness Wednesday.
That's right. Starting May 4th. So what are your other teachers doing today? Are they doing like nothing?
No, they're all doing, except for Spanish.
Spanish and Pig, we're not doing anything.
Every day in Spanish.
It's wellness
I
day.
had afternoon instructions for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think we should just play games every Wednesday from now on.
Yeah.
I don't think.
And then do work after May 4th?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea.
We should play like board games and stuff, like those ones you did in Applied Math. We should do that
Well,
after.
there's like COVID concerns with those things. Peace, bro. Peace. We'll definitely play some games though after.